Checking in. Everyone see my presentation screen?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for coming today. There's been a lot of side chats this morning about how, data management and kind of how that sausage is made is not everyone's cup of tea, and I totally appreciate that. Ian and I are going to make today as exciting and painless as we can, and we're going to just jump right in. So let me see. Hopefully I can get my slides to change. Stand by. So first, I just want to thank partners, because I'm going to talk a lot about data today, and without our partners and all the researchers and all of the folks doing this work, we wouldn't have data to talk about. So thank you so much, everyone. I think it's just one of those things where a lot of times the people out there doing the data collection aren't getting acknowledged, and I want to make sure that we really put the right foot forward here and say thank you. And I also really want to say thank you to April Silva for always being my poster child for thanking everyone. So I know you're on the call today, so you get to see my thank you card to you and to all of our partners. So anyway, just starting, I just want to start with that. I do want to make a couple shout outs. Columbia Land Trust collects a lot of data that we're going to talk about today. PNNL has collected a lot of the data. CREST clearly has collected a copious amount of data. We also have UW collecting data, OHSU, the Qatc tribe, pretty much everyone that's on this slide has collected and contributed data that we're going to talk about today. So thank you all, and looking forward to continuing to collaborate with you moving forward. All right, so what am I going to talk about today? Well, I think everybody on the call probably is familiar with the EMP and the AEMR program, so I'll just briefly touch on what those are. I am going to publish this talk online, so I want to make sure to give a little bit of background for folks who are unfamiliar with these programs, and talk a little bit about the background of why we need a data management system. Talk a lot about Tableau. What is Tableau? How does it work? What is its utility to us? Provide a lot of dashboard examples, kind of showing where we're at with the process of transitioning to utilizing Tableau to collaborate and share data, and then talk about our next steps. And this is a picture of, I think it's me out at Woluski back in 2014. So we have a lot of data for a lot of sites from many years, including my own data sets. All right, so where is all this data coming from? For those folks who are not familiar with the Columbia Estuary Ecosystem Restoration Program that we affectionately call CERP, LSEP manages two of the programs within this that collect a lot of data that we use to understand the ecosystem of the Lower Columbia and really help restore it. So the Ecosystem Monitoring Program is a program that looks at essentially reference conditions, so unimpacted tidal wetland sites throughout the Lower Columbia River. It's a status and trends program where we can get a really good feeling for salmon food web dynamics, and also have sort of an eye to the future for thinking about how climate change may impact the conditions of the Columbia River, and think about planning for adaptation and continued conservation. Now, very closely related to the Ecosystem Monitoring Program is the Action Effectiveness Monitoring and Research Program. This is a program where we're going out and collecting similar data across restoration projects, pre and post restoration. So looking at restoration effectiveness and then comparing that data to these reference conditions to understand how effective our our restoration techniques are, also our monitoring techniques. And again, thinking towards the future, how is climate change, how is changing restoration actions and conservation plans going to affect these habitats moving forward? So these two programs work really synergistically and produce a lot of data. Now I'm going to get a little bit deeper into exactly what data I'm talking about. Again, please forgive me if you're very familiar with these programs and have seen these slides many times. For the Ecosystem Monitoring Program, we have main stem data collected, abiotic site conditions collected, we have food web dynamic data collected. These are all sort of centered around salmon habitat monitoring, and these data are collected by a suite of researchers. We have OHSU collecting this data, we have UW helping with the data collection, NOAA is collecting a lot of fish data. We have CREST out there helping us with field data collection, and LSEP collects all the habitat structure, hydrology, soils, sediment accretion, and detritus data. Now, we're not the only ones that have collected this data. This data collection has been shared by many groups, and I'm not going to mention them all right now, but if you're here, you know who you are. And that's why I started with that thank you slide. Many people are contributing. So as you can tell, this is a very dynamic program with many different moving parts and types of data. And as we start transitioning to a Tableau data management and sharing system, we're working with our own in-house habitat data and then hoping to kind of expand it to these other components to do more synergistic analysis and synthesis work. Okay, now for the action effectiveness monitoring research program, we do collect a similar suite of data, but it's a little different. We have a couple different levels. And just to start out, all restoration projects funded by BPA under the program get a level 3 monitoring. Level 3 monitoring just stands for basic hydrology conditions, and that's where we monitor water surface elevation, depth, and temperature inside a restoration project, and typically at a location nearby, like in a main stem, where that restoration would be connecting back into. Then we collect sediment accretion and erosion data at that site to help understand how those sediment dynamics will change post-restoration. A lot of these systems, when they're disconnected from the river for a very long time, become sediment starved, and we expect there to be very significant sediment dynamics upon reconnection. So we're trying to track that. That's the very basic level of monitoring that all sites get. Now, level 2 monitoring is a more intensive habitat structure monitoring that a selection of sites get. And I should go back and say that level 3 monitoring is conducted typically pre and then years 1 through 5 post and at year 10. And then for the more intensive habitat monitoring, which is synergistic with that, that is collected pre, 1 year post, 3 years post, 5 years post, and 10 years post. So we have a lot of different moving parts and schedules for this. But the take home is there's a lot of different data that's collected to help us evaluate action effectiveness of the restoration approaches and really come back and understand how those sites are functioning ecologically. All right, so that is the overview of the 2 programs, a really brief overview. We have really large reports that come out for those programs. I'm happy to share more information if you're new to this or if you would just like more information about our methods. Moving into why we need a proper data management system. Well, if you're not sold yet, this ends up being over 71 plus sites across the Lower Columbia. I think EMP data, ecosystem monitoring program data, some of the first data started in 2008. So we have a database that houses data that all the way back from 2008 to today. And every year we collect more data and compile that and report out on it. And so it ends up being a lot of data. Level 3 data, right now we are compiling this and we have over 6 million data points just for hydrology. And so this is something that is way beyond the scope of managing it in Excel. In addition to that, of course, we have all this habitat data, and then we really want to bring in all of the information for better synthesis and collaboration across researchers and folks who are interested. Now, I want to just make it clear that SERP understood the need for this data management system. And between the years of 2011 and 2018, there was an active program to create a proprietary database and data management system. However, in 2018, right after the 2017-2018 synthesis memo came out, that project stalled. And so I have been working, I should give a little bit of background for myself. I've been working for the Estuary Partnership since 2017. I've been working in the river collecting data since 2008. And I was very excited about this regional database. And when I started working for the partnership, Matthew Schwartz and I, who was working as the manager at the time of the program, we were actively trying to get ready to transition into it. And so then when it stalled, we started thinking about solutions. What are other solutions that we could use just to even manage our own data in-house? And so when you're thinking about these really fun things like data management solutions, things like data limits, database capacity, accessibility, ease of use. Ian and I kind of brainstormed this list, and I think it is pretty comprehensive. Being able to QA/QC, edit data, analyze data, visualize data, kind of in a combined space. Also wanting to include that mapping and geospatial component. And then of course, collaboration. How easy is it for other people to access the data, download the data, collaborate with you in that space? Is there an online platform? In the world of remote work, we're all getting online to work together. And then, of course, how much does it cost? Is that a really high barrier to entry? Is it not? And so I'm gonna walk through some of the issues with the way that we have been managing the data, and then talk about how Tableau is providing a lot of solutions for various different components of this. All right, and I'm gonna use some memes to help wake up the crowd. So you're working in Excel, and at first you've just got, a couple hundred rows of data, and you're doing great. You got a pivot table, you got some graphs, it's working seamlessly. As you reach data limits in Excel, and you don't even need to reach them. I found that if I get to about 500 rows of data, Excel stops functioning in a productive way. And I feel like I'm Drew here, stuck in the mud, because that's about how fast you move in Excel when you get a lot of data. Excel is also not great for managing time series data. And when we have, most of the data that we collect that has a lot of rows is time series data. It's water quality over time. And so I'm sure we've all had moments with Excel, and I'm not saying that it doesn't have its place, because it does, and it always will. And I love a pivot table, but it has challenges. All right, so what's next? What are some really low-hanging fruit for thinking about data management? We have an MS Access, so that's a data management platform. Definitely can hold your data, do some relational tables in there. It's not very flexible, and it's not super user-friendly, and they're actually going to sunset the program. Now, I'm sure Microsoft will come up with some new innovative reboot of Access, but if you're looking at memes, like I did, of people being frustrated with MS Access, what you'll find is that most of them are not safe for work. And so people get very frustrated with that program. Now, ARC products, ARC is giant, right? They have many different products, and they have the ARC Online, and they have ARC Pro. These are new things coming, really trying to catch up to the technology that we see out here. However, I will say, as a heavy ARC user, I find ARC to be very, very slow. And so sometimes when I just need to make a simple map, by the time I get it started, I've already completely, I've opened Tableau, I've created a map, and I've exported it. And then ARC is thinking of, is like, oh, okay, I'm ready to go now. So I realize that that might be just my own specific example. And I will say that as we talk about Tableau, you can connect Tableau directly to your ARC Online account, your ARC Online server. It actually works seamlessly with ARC Online. So it might be something that if you're already, as I know some of you are, really attached to that ARC GIS online system, it could be a good add-on or component. All right, so that's enough about ARC. Lastly, who doesn't love to code in R? I mean, that is where you get these amazing statistical analyses, some really cool plots that you can make. Of course, we love Python. Ian loves Python. I love R. We put our time in coding, and that's how we've been doing a lot of the analysis so far. But you know what? That's not everybody's cup of tea. And if you're trying to collaborate across groups and really show people how to do work themselves, like here, you can do this analysis yourself. It's a pretty high bar for entry if you're trying to teach them to code. So these are all things that we've been considering. Okay, now I'm going to talk about COVID. Trust me, it's going to come back to Tableau really quickly. So these are all things that I was considering as we moved into this era of really not having a solution for drowning in data and wanting to be able to do good synthesis work. And so in 2020, we all went into lockdown, and some of us obsessively started checking the Oregon Health Authority's website for data. If you're data driven like me, I checked it every day. Eventually, I started getting really excited about the way the Oregon Health Authority was sharing their data. And I was just like laying in bed one day, clicking on the data, and was like, what are they using? This is amazing. This platform that they're sharing the data in is amazing. And so I want to say that it wasn't the first time I had heard of Tableau. I'm going to give Jenny Dezzo a shout out. She brought Tableau up back in 2018 and was like, you need to check this out. And in 2018, they were still doing a lot of growing. And by the time we got to 2021, they were doing things like hosting a huge Tableau public community and hosting all this Oregon Health Authority COVID data. And so that's where I got to a place where I was like, can we host data like this? Can we share data like this? Is this a platform that we could use? And I started to mess around with it and figure it out. And the answer is yes. So if you're curious about, maybe you don't want to know any of the COVID news anymore, and that's totally fine. But they have some amazing and beautiful COVID data dashboards on Tableau Public that I recommend checking out. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about COVID anymore, but so Tableau ended up being a really amazing solution for a lot of the things that we were encountering with our data management process. There really are no data limits. You can use very flexible relational tables and to create databases. They have Tableau Prep, which allows you to go in and create QA/QC and even edit your data in that space. So you don't have to touch Excel for that. You can create data flows to help essentially make that automatic, and zero coding required to do that work. So this is a very, very low barrier for entry, which makes collaboration in the space and sharing this process and knowledge with others really easy and wonderful. So I'm really excited about that. Now I want to make it clear, if you want to code in Tableau and do amazing modeling and analysis, you can. You can bring Python, you can bring R code in there. You can even use some of the coding language that you might be familiar with in Excel into that Tableau space and do that analysis in that space. But you don't necessarily need to. Tableau is extremely good at visualizing your data and helping you explore it and analyze it. Okay, so one of the other things that just really was the icing on the cake for me for Tableau is that it allows you to do some mapping. You can do geospatial analysis and you can make some maps. Of course, it is not the mapping engine of ArcGIS, which is why they can allow you to link into it if you want, but it does allow you to do a lot. So a lot of the work that folks do in ArcGIS can be accomplished just in the native Tableau space. Okay, so that's all really exciting. Then you can collaborate and disseminate results also very easily. Tableau, of course, is a proprietary program, but if I push my data into the Tableau public space through a dashboard or a series of workbooks, you can go in there, anyone can go in there and download it as an Excel table or a text file or really any format that you prefer. And so there's no barrier there for you to explore that data I posted with Tableau. You don't necessarily need to download Tableau. However, I'm going to jump to the next slide and talk about how much Tableau costs, because it depends on how you want to share your data. So first I should say that I am not a Tableau sales rep, nor am I an expert. This is a very basic breakdown of how we plan on utilizing Tableau and how I think this community probably, can understand it. If you want more information, there is a lot of information about Tableau online. I will also say that Tableau is a giant organization. It's mainly been used for marketing and sales and finance management. So we are pushing the limits here. We're not pushing the limits. We're utilizing this new platform and we're being pioneers by utilizing it for environmental and conservation data. We are not the first people to do this. There are researchers out of UW who have been utilizing it for sea level rise modeling. And I'm happy to share links to those dashboards. So it's just this really cool interface. They traded publicly, I think, for something like $15 billion. So it's a huge company. It's not small. It's not a startup. Anyway, back to how much it costs. Maybe you've already figured it out by looking at the schematic and not listening. That's fine. You have two options. You can interact with Tableau for free in the Tableau public space. So you can go to our public dashboard or any public dashboard. You can look at the data. It doesn't cost anything. You don't even need to download an app or anything like that. If you want to create your own Tableau dashboard, if you're happy and okay with it being in a public space, you can do that all for free. Now, there are a few limitations. You can't do quite as many fancy things as you can if you pay for the desktop app, but it does provide a lot of functionality. Now, if you want to keep your data private and have a password protected, or just keep your data directly on your computer and not put it online, there are some costs associated, but it really depends on exactly what you're doing and how many folks in your team you want to be utilizing that service. So I just wanted to really point out here that you have like a free public version and then a cost varies password protected version of utilizing Tableau. All right, so now I'm going to pass the mic over to Ian, and we're going to explore. I'm going to stop sharing so Ian can share his screen. Excuse me. We're going to explore some examples in Tableau. So these are examples that we have, move this over here, developed. And I want to just point out a couple of things in Ian's space. I'm going to try to do this. We practiced this a couple times to see if this would work seamlessly. So just to orient you to Ian's screen, he is using our Tableau online. So he is in an internet browser and he's in full screen mode to share this data dashboard we've created specifically for this talk today. Now, this data dashboard has these gray boxes on top, and I'm trying to mouse over them so you can see them. Now, in a dashboard, these gray boxes are essentially different pages, or if you think about it like a PowerPoint, they're dynamic living PowerPoint slides, where if you have access to this on your computer, which we're going to give you access after today's talk, you could click through this and explore it on your own. So I just wanted to set that up for Ian. And then the other thing I want to set up is that these examples are coming from essentially our first big push to create this giant Tableau database with our sediment accretion and erosion monitoring data, which we are still actively QA/QCing with project sponsors. It is actually pretty good to go. We shared the data with P&L and are collaborating with them on an analysis. But the example that we're providing is essentially that QA/QC dashboard that we used to talk to people who are collecting the data and make sure that data was looking correct. All right, Ian, it's your turn to go.
Cool. So this is Tableau, as Sarah just mentioned. So go to the first page of the story, and basically we'll talk about data management, QA/QC process, the exploration and analysis of this data, as well as how we share this data. So we'll cover basically the sediment state QA/QC process and how we've basically analyzed that with sea level rise. We'll talk about the hydrology data set and showcase some initial habitat opportunity analyses. We'll also chat about some initial drone work we've been doing and some of our next steps. And lastly, we'll share some of our previous dashboards with you. So, sediment accretion overview. Basically, this is a map showing every single site we have sediment accretion data for. So a sediment stake is, we hammer 2 PVC pipes into the ground, and then we measure from the top of the stakes to the ground surface elevation. And then every single year we come back and we measure that, and the difference in height from the top of the stakes to the ground is a sediment accretion measurement. We're measuring on like the centimeter scale, so it's too precise for an RTK to really pick up. So we've had to do workarounds. And this process is a bit, it's not super reliable. It is reliable, but it has inherent data issues with it, such as like mixing up stakes or measuring to the top of this level instead of the bottom or whatever. So here is kind of our initial QA/QC process. So you can see some box plots, and this map is colored now by site reach. So reach is A through H. A box plot has 50% of the data within the two, I guess, the outsides of the boxes, and it's colored red for questionable data. We asked sponsors about every single one of these data points, and they basically told us if the stake was good, it was great, or they cool. So we asked sponsors about every single stake, and if they felt it could reasonably undergo that much accretion, we kept the stake inside, such as many of the Wiliski stakes. We felt they could actually, see that much accretion, but other stakes we felt they could not. So let's go into the benchmark QA/QC. So now we have, again, the same map with all the stakes, and then we have a second map with the actual stake locations. So if you mouse over the stakes, you can see a tooltip. This tooltip is entirely customizable. We can put whatever we want into it. So these two have different, I guess, information inside of each tooltip. And down here we have a table that shows every single measurement we've took at the White Island stakes. You can see it's all colored gray because that means we felt it was all, great data. But at Kendall Farm, for example, There are 2 questionable accretion measurements, and we asked CLT, I believe, to specifically look at that. Next, I go to the first of the analyses. So this is sediment accretion by marsh elevation, and it's the same map with each site with sediment accretion data followed by each stake. The stakes are colored based on low marsh versus high marsh. So high marsh is the dark green and low marsh is the light green. Here we have a scatter plot with a regression line showing basically the net change in elevation. So starting from year 0, after 6 years, the low marsh would have gained like 1.91 centimeters in height. Down here we have the accretion rate as a box plot to show the variability of the accretion measurements. At White's Island, you can see that the low marsh is accreting about twice as fast as the high marsh. And then if we go to a different site, such as Kendall Farm, we can see a similar trend once it loads. You can see the similar trend that low marsh is accreting slightly faster than the high marsh, but low marsh is overall accreted more. Now we'll go to net accretion by years post restoration. So on the left, we have the reference sites, and then on the right, we have years post-construction. The map is colored now by restoration sites in orange and reference sites in blue. So you can see in the low marsh plots down here that it starts very variable and then becomes progressively less variable over time. The high marsh plots do the same trend, except they're substantially less variable than the low marsh plots. If you look at a specific reach, such as reach B, you can see that's a similar trend where it starts very variable and then becomes less variable over time. Now I'll check sea level rise, which is the fun stuff. So here we have a sea level rise plot, basically. So this is net accretion rates over time as a rate per year. We also have the Army Corps' 2020 model, where they modeled sea level rise along the river reach. Many other models only model sea level rise at the coast, but the Army Corps model went all the way up the river reaches. We extrapolated this out to a rate per year. So this 50-year rate is a half meter at 50 years at the coast, but we've extrapolated it to a yearly rate. You can see that clearly some reaches are not keeping up with sea level rise, such as reaches D, F, and G. There could be many different reasons, but reach G only has Dibley Slough as the site, and we need more data for that site to really conclusively say anything about that reach. Reach F is the Savi Island reach, so there's a lot of cattle activity on that in that region of the river, and cattle cause erosion. So reach G also is pretty limited on the number of data points we have, but as we get more data points and increased monitoring at many of the sites, such as Steigerwald, we'll get a lot more a significant increased picture of what's actually happening at these reaches. Now Sarah will chat to you about hydrology.
Thanks, Ian. Let's see if it's gonna let me. So one thing that I wanted to mention is that over the last few years, especially during the SM2, I'm trying to click on hydrology overview, and maybe you want to click on it. So when we're running teams, sometimes our Tableau is slow because it's like all the internet, because we're doing an online all internet situation. I just will give you a heads up on that. So what I was going to say is that when we did the synthesis in 2017, 2018, we found that there was a lot of variability inherent to the sediment accretion and erosion data, and that we really needed to increase the amount of sampling that we do, or the amount of sediment accretion and erosion benches installed on sites. And so now, as new sites are coming online, we're increasing it from like 1 bench to 9, and so we do plan on seeing a lot of increased data density to help us answer those questions moving forward. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about the hydrology database. Now, this is a similar dashboard that we made to QA/QC the data with our project sponsors, and we're only about 60% done with incorporating historic data into this, and we've already gotten about 6 million data points. So it's a pretty data heavy compilation, but Tableau makes it well worth making the effort to get the data QA/QC'd and in to this essentially synergistic database, so we can analyze it not just with itself, but also looking at sediment accretion data and all of the other data that we're going to bring online. So this is essentially showing a map of where all the data for the hydrology data we have. And then a similar map where we can look at the location of data loggers within a site. So for Woluski, we have a really rich history of hydrology monitoring out there. I included it as a site for my dissertation. And so we have a lot of pre-monitoring. So essentially pre is going to be 2014 to 2017. And then if you look at the blue and the pink on squiggly lines on these hydrographs, this top one is water surface elevation, the bottom one is temperature. You can see that we're monitoring, this shows both reference conditions, so outside of the site and then also inside the site. And then it jumps in 2017 when the site was tidally reconnected. So it's really just a rough look at that data, but you can really pick out if you have any outliers or if there's any kind of systematic errors in that data. It's a great way to kind of visualize and go through all the sites at once. We are utilizing these data to think about salmon habitat opportunity. So this is a metric that was developed by Dan Bottom, and he published it in 2005 and in 2011. Matthew Swartz and I adapted it for the SM2 synthesis memo report, and these are slides that came from our presentation. So when I talk about salmon habitat opportunity, what I mean is that it's the amount of time where there's enough water, so it has to be at least a meter of water in depth, over the salmon barrier or in the channel, and then the temperatures need to be in the optimal range. So we have, and it was defined as 17.5 degrees Celsius for this analysis. Now, taking the data in Tableau, it's actually quite simple to make these calculations and show how salmon habitat opportunity has changed at a site pre and post restoration. I'm showing you some pie charts now. This is of Woluski again. And if I clicked on any of these other sites, it would show up for those as well. And I can try to do that in a second. But first, I'm going to talk through these pie graphs. We have Daggett Point here. You can see about 90% of the time, it's optimal salmon habitat opportunity at that site over the period of monitoring. And then the Woluski project, before restoration occurred, very, very low salmon habitat opportunity. Only, less than 10% of the time did salmon have access. But post-restoration, we see almost 80% of the time optimal conditions for salmon. So this is a really, personally, I'm a little biased, but I think this is a really great way to look at the data and identify restoration success. And so next steps in this would be to take this data and integrate it across the other information that we gather on these sites, looking at it across the entire site footprint, utilizing the drone data. But first, Ian, do you want to try selecting a couple more sites? We do want to show that it's dynamic, but because of the internet speeds and doing like a big Teams call, it can be challenging. But that's why we're going to share the dashboard with everyone so they can explore it on their own. We're going to give it a second. So like I said, next steps for this and what Ian and I are going to be working on in the next 2 months is showing how you can integrate this hydrology and temperature data across the drone data that we collect. Drone data, we can create very high resolution digital surface models for elevation, as well as plant community mapping. And so you could probably start thinking about the power of being able to map hydrology, salmon habitat opportunity over a site and overlay that in terms of plant community conditions. And so we're really excited to show that. Okay, Ian has selected the Savi Island sites, so affectionately called North Unit, phase 1 and 2. And you can see here, although these pie charts are small, that Cunningham Lake is the reference. Post-restoration, these are achieving salmon habitat opportunity at the same or improved essentially rates. So it's a really powerful, quick look at how those sites are doing post-restoration and what removing that salmon barrier and allowing that hydrologic connectivity can do for a site. Now, these conditions will clearly change depending on the year of monitoring and all of those different environmental factors. And we definitely can look at that more as we explore these data. All right, so I'm going to try to wrap it up because I know we've been going a little long. Oh, this is the drone imagery. So hopefully this shows up clearly for you. And again, we'll share this so you guys can look at it yourselves. But we have zoomed in at a little corner of Woluski to show you how high resolution that drone imagery is that we have. And Ian has been able to pull that drone imagery into the Tableau space. So that is extremely powerful, because that means that when we then share these data, we can share that drone data, that drone raster data with others. And of course, it's going to be slightly reduced resolution than like raw data, but you will have the data outputs. And I think that that is a really powerful tool for other folks to be able to see how we're analyzing the data and utilize that data themselves. Okay, so talking about data sharing, I want to briefly mention a couple of our dashboards that we have on Tableau Public right now. So we're going to share a link to our Tableau Public profile, and we have a few dashboards on there that you can go in there, you can play with the data, you can download the data, you can just interact with that data in that Tableau space. Now, these are typically, these are dashboards that typically people are not accessing unless I share a link to them. So while they are public, it's not that everyone has access to them. But again, it's in that public space, so it's not password protected. I recommend looking through these projects. Multnomah Channel Natural Area has a really long history of data collection, and we've used the drone imagery and data in this project to think about project design moving forward. So we've done this work to share it with Metro and other partners, and it's a good example of the power of Tableau for showing a lot of data and kind of summarizing it. And then I want to also mention Staggerwald, which is one of our Tableau public pages or dashboards, if you will. Because Staggerwald is a new project and we're implementing all these new protocols and procedures, we thought it would be really good to bring this project into the Tableau public space right away. And we will be live updating this as we collect data and as we can. So folks can interact with the data, they can download the data, they can get a feel for how things are doing out at Staggerwald without having to wait for a giant report. And I know that that is something that the project partners were really interested in because they want to see how that project is changing on the ground. And so this allows that really easy sharing of that data and visualization. All right, so I've mentioned a lot of next steps already, but really the overall goal for next steps are to integrate and utilize these data to answer critical uncertainties at the site level and across the entire lower river. I think we've shown sort of the power of this. We're just scratching the surface. Ian and I are really new to Tableau, but we've been able to accomplish a lot. And so I think that with more time spent in the platform, we're going to be able to provide a lot more examples of how this can be really powerful for us. We're going to very quickly in 2 months spin up data dashboards for the AEMR sites monitored in 2020 and 2021. So be looking for that, and that's including that drone imagery. And we're going to continue to seek feedback from our community and evolve this process with analysis and reporting. And so on that note, let me see if I can click to the last one. I'm sure everyone with a PowerPoint, you're really tired of listening and watching. With the Tableau, once we share it, we have our login information if you want to see this specific dashboard, or we have a link if you would like to go to the Tableau public page and explore those. It's extremely interactive. So it's a lot more engaging when you can click around yourself and explore the data. All right, on that note, I will say that we are done. And I just want to also be very grateful for our partners again and for Ian, who has done so much work behind the scenes helping us get these dashboards ready to go.
All right. Thanks, you two. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Gotta be some questions. Everybody need to stand up and do some jumping jacks. What do y'all think?
Do you folks need a break before we discuss?
Oh, this is April. Oh, I see Jim's trying to talk too. You're muted, Jim. Just kidding. Sorry. We love this program. Sarah and Ian walked Ryan and I through the Tableau, and it looks fantastic. So I'm in the process of selling it to my boss, and it's just not a hard sell.
This looks like a really cool product. I don't typically dive into the data management piece, but I know for a couple projects I've worked on, we have just huge sums of data that we're trying to deal with. Do you have any, I know I could dive into it, but do you have any thoughts on do they have like data limitations in terms of how much you can place on there? Just curious.
Yeah, so if you are a paid, member of Tableau, depending on how you're working, I think we have a giant data limit. Like that, when I say it's unlimited, like it's even with our drone imagery data and all that stuff, we're gonna within that paid space. I think we have a lot of room to grow. So I think that we don't really have a data limit for that space that we pay for. And then if you want to push data to the public, it's actually a 10 million rows of data, I think. Ian, is that about right? Isn't that, we discussed that yesterday? So it's a lot. You can put a lot of data in the Tableau public space. And we've even been strategizing ways to, be able to post essentially, if we decided to, and if CERC wanted us to post all that data in a public space, if we could easily work within that limit, that 10 million rows of data limit. So I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And you further kind of expanded